Hey friends, welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn, and this is my flip of the Spellbinders June 2025 club kits. I'm going to give you a quick look at the 4 cards I make in this video, and as per usual, they will include a flat card, a layered card, an interactive card, and a pop-up card. And I'll be featuring the stencil of the month, small die, large die of the month, 3D embossing folder, and the clear stamp and die of the month. Because my flip videos do tend to be a little bit on the long side, I'll bookmark the video so you can jump straight to the card you want to see me make. Now, without further ado, let's make these. Okay, so starting off with my flat card, and this is actually the first card that I did make in this series. A lot of times the first card I make will be, usually it's either my interactive card or my pop-up card, and a lot of times it's my pop-up card because, truth be told, that's kind of the thing that excites me most, and so usually it'll be the first one that I make. But I really have been trying to practice a little bit at clean and simple design, and in fact I started a new series called recipe cards, and recipe card number 3 is one that I made for myself to get some practice at clean and simple, and it was actually inspired by Carly T. Miner, who I think just uses white space so effectively. And when I look at her profile, the thing that I kind of distilled from some, not all of her cards, because I was trying to come up with a rule for myself. And in studying her cards, the rule that I came up for how I could get a little bit better at clean and simple design is the rule of thirds. Basically, use about a third of the card. And so that's what I'm aiming for here. Now, this stencil set, there's actually 4 stencils that you get. 3 of them can be layered. And it's interesting because on one end they layer to give you this wavy pattern, and then on the other end they layer to give you like some bubbly patterns. So I think it's kind of cool, the effect of it. And then the 4th stencil is, I think you could kind of use it for like wind, suggesting wind movement. And one of the things that I tried with my ink blending through the stencil is I've got this, it's from Imagine Crafts, and it's called Ink Potion number 9, and it's meant to kind of encourage like blending and helping your inks move a little bit better. And so I tried a little bit of that, and it's kind of interesting the effect that it gave, because I think it kind of changed a little bit the viscosity of the VersaMagic ink that I was using, and it gave it almost like a very suede-like texture, which I kind of like. It's kind of interesting. I don't think it made it smoother, but it did make the ink move a little bit better, and I think I had some drier ink in some areas and then slightly more wet ink in other areas. But for something like water, I kind of like that effect of having some areas a little darker and some a little bit lighter. Now, this sentiment is just a straight sentiment, but I wanted it to match the curve of the stencil pattern. And so you can do that. You can always just kind of bend your photopolymer stamps a little bit. It'll bounce right back, but it's nice to be able to kind of give it a slightly different look and just have it, instead of going straight across, have it match the curve of that wave. And this little boat here, this is the freebie that you get if you are a Deluxe Caboodle subscriber and you get all of the club kits. So really quick, clean and simple card. Look at all that white space. Usually for me is very hard to do. All right, so now moving on to my layered card. This one is going to feature the 3D embossing folder, and I mean, I feel like it's not directional, this particular pattern, but if you look at the folder, it actually has these rope knots going the opposite way where they go left to right. But in my head, I kind of like it going up and down like this. And so that's how I chose to emboss this panel, which is made possible because the embossing folder is so large, so you can kind of use it in whatever orientation you want. But I like it going in this direction. And this is just craft color cardstock that I embossed, but I've got this Versacolor ink in, it's not super duper white. It's actually, I don't know. I mean, it's not the brightest white there is, but I think it's really nice, and it just helps to highlight those knots, that design, and kind of makes it pop a little bit better. But ultimately, though, I did end up covering a lot of it. So you'll see in a moment. What I actually end up doing is, because I wanted to use this fun walrus from the small die of the month, he's kind of big once you have him assembled. And so I wanted to frame him up. And because he's so large, I had to kind of pick a frame that was going to fit him nicely. And that ended up actually covering a good portion of this background. So it's got some lovely texture, and it looks great, but I kind of covered a lot of it up. But I had to trim off my card base a little bit, because you'll notice sometimes when you 3D emboss a panel that the overall dimension of that panel might change from where you originally cut it, because the embossing folder adds so much dimension, and it sort of raises so much of the cardstock that you might find that your panel is a little bit smaller once it's done, because all of that cardstock has to go somewhere. And I usually find that left to right, it tends to kind of shrink more in that direction, as opposed to top to bottom. And it might depend on the grain of your paper and which way is easier for the cardstock to shrink. But you might find yourself, if you start with a panel that's like perfectly sized to match your A2 card, for example, like I did here, after you've embossed it, if it's a little bit smaller, it's you might have to trim your card base down like I did if you wanted it to match. So here you can see I cut from a nested die set by Spellbinders, where you've got this really nice postage border, and then you also have a rectangle die that can cut a layer to go right over top. And I didn't want to lose that embossed background, even though I was covering up so much of it. So I embossed that little rectangle panel that goes over top. That way, I didn't do a super great job of making it look continuous, but at least it kind of maintains that pattern. And these 3D embossing folders are just so good that I really felt like I had to use a little bit of my 3D glue gel, not for dimension, but rather just so that some adhesive could really sink into, that layer behind it, which has been embossed. And I feel like that just helps to give it like a better stick, so that, because if you were to just use like a dry adhesive, that would just sit on the raised top of the embossed folder. And especially with the 3D embossing, because there might be a little bit of curvature and you just have some different depths, you might not end up with a lot of paper to paper contact between something that's flat and something that's been 3D embossed. So I find the 3D glue gel to be really useful, because you can just kind of squidge it down a little bit and it's going to go where it needs to go, so that it can make better contact with the layer underneath if it's been embossed. And for my sentiment, what I did was I stamped onto the same sort of that ivory cream color cardstock that I embossed the rope nuts, and that way it looks a little bit seamless, but it's not going to have that embossing, and so it kind of makes it super legible still. And I'm going to again use a little bit of 3D glue gel, not for the sake of adding lift to this, but more, like I said, just so that glue can, I'll just give us a little tappity tap so that it can really just sink in a little bit and hopefully give it a better hold. Okay, so now on to my third card. This one is going to feature the large die of the month, and in the large die of the month you can assemble this lighthouse, and it's kind of cool. It's got a lot of different elements to it, and you can actually there's a lot of scene building elements because you can create this little island with some waves, and there's some mountains which I'll use in my fourth and final card. And then of course you've got there's a component that there are actually a couple of components I didn't even use because there's some really cute little houses that you could add to the scene. And then one of the cool things, I should have used this, but I'm gonna have to come back and use it because there's this cool cloud that it's kind of neat. It has some patterning that you can add to it to make it kind of look a little bit different as like a more lacy design. It's pretty neat. It's hard to explain without actually die cutting it, but I'm gonna have to play with it because I think it's kind of interesting. But I didn't remember to use it for my cards, this set of cards, so I'll have to come back and use that one later. But what I'm gonna do in this card is just do a little bit of ink blending. I do this combination. It's like my go-to combination for a sunset. I always use the same 3 colors. I always use apply the inks in the exact same way. I really love Versacolor pigment inks, and so I like to start on the 2 opposing ends with the yellow and the red, and then I'll go back in with the orange. But I don't have a Versacolor in orange, so I use my VersaFine Clair, which is also a pigment-based ink. The formulations are a little bit different, but they'll both I think blend nicely, play nicely together, and so I like to just go back and forth. So I start off and I try to blend both the yellow into the middle so that when I go in with the orange it overlaps, and same with the red. I kind of blend the red up towards the middle beyond what I think I would want, and then that way you get a nice overlap between red and orange, and also between the orange and the yellow. And I just keep on going back and forth until it's a blend that I like, and give it some time to dry too, because once the ink settles it's going to also look a little bit different, and so you can always come back in and ink it up a little bit more. But I use this combination so much, I know how it's gonna look, and I'm always really happy with this as my sunset. Sometimes I don't have quite as much of the red and orange portion, and so that's one thing that I might change up every once in a while. But I really do feel like I need to change up my sunset game and maybe try a different combination. But when something works for you, why change it? Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do with this lighthouse. There's a layering component to it where the top layer of this, it does have the windows cut through, but I want to light up one of these little window openings. And so I'm actually going to cut the opening through on this base layer because I want to use this tower, this lighthouse, to actually hide a one light. And this is a case where the object that I want to light up is actually big enough to hide the light itself, which isn't always the case. So I can actually hide this entire one light behind the lighthouse. And that's because this particular one light, it's not the one that you would buy individually. That one is slightly different. The one light that you buy where it's only one lights, it's slightly wider and shorter, and the button to turn it on is a little bit offset. This particular one light is actually from the Halo combo light package. And now you can get the this as either a 3-pack where you have one Halo light and 2 one lights, or the original where it's a 6-pack and you get 2 Halo lights and 4 one lights. I really like the Halo combo packs because I kind of feel like you really get great value for money, because you have not only a large number of lights, but a variety of them too. It's the only one currently in the Pear Blossom Press lights where you get a combination of 2 different types of lights. And mostly that's because the Halo light has a ring of 5 lights, set in a circle, and there's just so much space in the center of those circles. And so Amanda and Micah wanted to kind of give us all great value for money, and instead of just having that space be empty and wasted, they packed in some additional one lights. So it's really great. And then now you have the option of getting, if you don't make a lot of light up cards, you have the option of getting it just the one Halo with 2 one lights, which I still find is a great deal because of that variety, and you get still a pretty decent quantity of lights. So what I'm gonna do is try to dry fit everything a little bit. And so this is sort of my process whenever I do a light up card, because a couple of considerations. You want to make sure that wherever you are positioning things, that your one light mechanism is hidden, that you know where the button's going to be and where the user has to push the button to turn the light on. I like to always test the light before I install it. Never had a problem with a battery because they are packaged separately. So your battery is not going to be draining before it even arrives to you. So the battery I have always found is always a nice fresh battery. The lights and the circuitry always works great. So, but you should still test it just in case. And so I want to make sure that before I start gluing things down, that I know where everything is meant to go. And in particular, because some of these things need to be lifted on some foam, if you have to do any stamping, you want to try to remember to do all of your stamping before you start adhering things down, because it's always easier to do your stamping when everything's nice and flat, everything's nice and level, and there's no like foam behind there. Now, if you're using Pear Blossom Press's world's best foam tape, then it's actually not a super big deal, because you can always lift anything that you've put down with foam, because you get a good like half hour or so to kind of remove it if you need to remove it. It's nice and temporary. It won't tear up your cardstock. And then after about a day, when it's like fully cured, it becomes permanent. And you have a nice strong stick. So those are some of the considerations that you kind of want to take into account when you are making a light up card. So, what is the object that you want to light up? In this case, it's going to be my lighthouse, one of the windows in my lighthouse, and positioning it so that you know where it's going to sit on your card, and you know where the button needs to be, and where to stamp your press or your push instructions so that whoever gets the card will actually know that it's interactive, that there's something that they can do and that there's a bit of magic waiting for them. And so you want to make sure to try to dry fit everything to really, make sure that it all lines up where you want it to be. Now, I glued that down a little bit early because I did want to put down this layer of blue cardstock first. And that's the other thing with light up cards. It's the whole idea of, where do you need to hide the light? And because I don't need a big background panel, because you could assemble this very differently if you wanted. You could have put the one light on the card base itself and then build everything up on a separate layer over top of it. But I chose, because my lighthouse is big enough and this one light is small enough, I ink blended directly onto my card base. I glued that first layer of water right onto my card base. And then the one light went on top of that. And then all of these additional die cut components I can layer on top. Now, I have some vellum that I colored with an alcohol marker so that it still looks yellow and it still looks like it's lit up even before you push the button. And I'm going to put some foam on this island and wave die cut, assembled die cut component. And part of that is going to hide my light. And then my lighthouse will hide the other portion of my light. So I just need to add some foam to kind of match the thickness. And then I'm gonna make sure that everything lights up and everything's positioned where it needs to be. And I'm always testing. That's the thing with pop-up cards, interactive cards. Just always continue to test things and make sure that it all kind of moves and operates the way that you would expect. Light up cards are really easy. If you've never made one before, you should definitely give it a try, because especially with a one light, it's not tricky at all to install. Really, you just have to think about what it is you want to light up and how to hide your one light. And from there, everything else will kind of fall into place. But one of the nice things is that Spellbinders does carry the Pear Blossom Press lights now, and in fact a lot of places have started carrying the lights, so now it's even easier to, when you're shopping dies and whatnot that you think might be fun to add a light up mechanism to, you can just throw in some lights while you're shopping right there. So Spellbinders sells them, scrapbook.com sells them. So a lot of places that you shop now, it's really convenient to just toss in some lights. And if you can find it, toss in some of the world's best foam tape too, because it's amazing stuff. Often out of stock on Amanda's website, but I haven't checked recently, but I always try to, if I'm running low, check everywhere. If I can't get it directly from Amanda, I am on her design team, and so I do get it as part of being on the design team, but you never know. Every once in a while, it might get down to where I just need an emergency roll that I have to pick up myself. So always be on the lookout for the world's best foam tape. If you see it, get it. So now I haven't thought about my sentiment until now, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to stamp directly onto this background, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to put my sentiment on the lower portion where the water is or on the upper portion where the sky is. And because I was so indecisive, I decided I'll just stamp onto some vellum. And so it has the benefit of being a little bit translucent, but also it helps to still make it legible and stand out a little bit against the background, whichever background I chose. So that's the nice thing with vellum. It kind of can really dull the background a little bit, so that anything that you put on top, and in this case a sentiment, is a little bit more easy to read. Now with vellum, when you put adhesive behind it, it can kind of alter, change how it looks, because you can kind of see that adhesive. So one trick is to line the whole thing with adhesive so that everything has adhesive behind it. So what I did was before I used the coordinating die to cut out the sentiment, I lined it with double-sided adhesive sheet, and that way it's got adhesive behind the whole thing. And I did end up attaching it to the top portion where the sky is. So now onto my pop-up card, and I will give you a final look at all of the cards at the very end. But I'm starting this pop-up card with a couple of different shades of blue solid color cardstock, and I'm just gonna use the stencil in a slightly different way. So what I did was I just traced the curvy line of, it's the exact same set of stencils that I used on my very first card, on my flat card. Instead of stenciling though, I just traced that line so that I can just cut out these waves. Now, waves are, I guess, kind of easy enough to freehand cut, but I still wanted to trace out the stenciled version just to give you the idea that maybe there's a stencil pattern that's not quite as easy to sort of cut freehand. And so it's just a different idea for how you can use your stencil. You can use it as, just a decorative edge if you just trace against it. And so I've got that already kind of cut. I'm going to further cut it down to size later. But right now I just want to build up the scene on the inside of my card. So I'm starting with a little bit of ink blending to give myself a nice sky background. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the water and all of those waves be in the foreground. And in my background, I want some of the other landscape components that come as part of the large die of the month. And I really like the mountains. And I think I had considered maybe adding the clouds to this, but I kind of ran out of room because once I had all of the layers of the different waves and then a little bit of grass for the land and then my mountains, I really just ran out of vertical space, and so couldn't fit the clouds in. But what I'm doing now is all of these blue panels, they did start off as A2 panels, but I've cut them down so that I can kind of build up this scene a little bit, where one of the nice things with a pop-up card is with your most basic pop-up mechanism, you can add a lot of layers really. So you can have kind of different sort of planes, if you're thinking about sort of the depth, you've got the foreground, your midground, and your background. And you can kind of add as many different of those planes as you want, and then each of them becomes an opportunity to create like a little scene. Now, before I start gluing stuff on the inside of my card though, I want to get a little bit of the front of my card done, because again, while it's nice and flat, it's easier to do things like this, stencil through it. And this is the opposite end of the same stencil that I used on my first card and that I used to kind of trace that cut line. And so it's kind of neat. It just gives you two different effects, two different looks. And I think, how sometimes there's like die cuts of a witch's cauldron? I kind of feel like you could use this stencil to be like a witch's brew and it's just bubbling up out of the cauldron, I feel like you could definitely use this stencil for that. And there's all three of the wave stencils have a different little bubbly pattern on the opposite end of it. So you've got a lot of different options there. So again, I'm gonna go ahead and do a little bit more stamping. This time I'm gonna stamp my sentiment. And a little bit of a confession, I thought I grabbed the sentiment just saying hello, like the one that I used earlier. I didn't realize that I grabbed the wrong one and I stamped out from the crew. And it wasn't until the very end when I was adhering down the little seagull, which is actually from the small die of the month. But it wasn't until the very, very end that I realized, oops, I didn't get the sentiment that I wanted. But I think in the end, I made it work. And I found a great matching sentiment to put on the inside of the card, which actually matches the scene too. So I think I saved it, but just goes to show I should always really double check what it is I'm actually stamping. Okay, so this is the most basic pop-up mechanism. It's just a strip. It doesn't even really matter how wide this is, but I usually go with 1/2 inch. And then what I do is I score in half that strip, and then I score 2 more times. And how you determine where to score is that one section is going to be the distance from the back to the front of this plane, essentially. Then your next distance is going to be how tall this pop-up mechanism can be. And that is going to be dictated by whatever it is you are attaching to this pop-up mechanism, because it needs to cover it. So this needs to be shorter than whatever it is you glue to attach it to. So, and don't worry, I'm going to be doing this like 2 more times. So I'll continue to explain as I get each of these layers in. But you can see I'm going to add one of my waves to this first set of pop-ups. And this being the tallest wave, that's why that first set of pop-up mechanisms, why it could be so tall, because I knew that this panel here is going to be tall enough to cover it. And so every time I go to glue something down, I always line it up and then I just close my card on top of it so that I know that my card will ultimately close down flat. When I was first starting to make pop-up cards, if I did start by gluing things kind of in their 3D like upright position, and then I found that sometimes I had lined things up wrong and it just didn't close all the way. So here again, I've got another pair, and I score in half, and then I decided for this one it can be a little bit closer to the wave that's behind it. So then I scored on the right edge. I think it was close to like 3/8 of an inch. And then this also needs to be a little bit shorter because my next set of waves is not quite as tall. And so that's the height. And then you just want to repeat those score lines. You want to repeat those measurements. So your first score line is going to be the distance from the panel behind it to the panel that you are about to glue down. And then you want to score for the height of how tall the mechanism can be. Then you want to score the same depth that you did earlier. And then that should bring you all the way around to the back. Now, when you start to glue these down, you can glue them down. I just did it just now 2 different ways. So sometimes I glue to the bottom portion of my card base first, and then fold it in half, put glue on the 4th section, because it's really just the very first section and the very last section, the 2 segments at the ends. Those are the segments that get adhesive. And when you glue this down, you just want to fold it down flat, and you'll be able to always make sure then that your card will always fold down flat. So there I just put glue on the first section, and then I just put glue on the very last section, and I fold down flat. And you'll see it just attaches where it needs to attach. And then on the front facing panel, I put adhesive and fold down flat again so that it grabs that scene element. And so now look at all of this opportunity that I have to build up my scene. So I've got the farmost background. That's where I'm going to put these mountains. And all of these are part of the large die of the month. You get 2 different size mountains, and then they can be snow capped, or you can leave the snow cap off if you want. But I decided to include them. And so you've got that as one area to build up your scene. And then I've got the 3 waves. So now I can add different elements to each of those waves. And so in the middle wave, I've got the island cut out. And that again is from the large die of the month. And so I'm going to attach this directly to that second wave, like right behind it. And I've got another light tower assembled, and there's a die that will cut out the light beams. And so what I did was again from vellum, just used an alcohol marker to color in some vellum, and then I glued that. So it's kind of translucent like light would be. So I kind of like that look of it. And it just feels softer than using like a yellow solid color cardstock. So I've got that is as one of sort of the mid grounds. And then I've got another little boat assembled. Again, this is the freebie that you get if you were to get the whole kind of kit and caboodle. I think it's the deluxe caboodle, but that's all 10 club kits. And if you are already a subscriber, a club member, you have until the 5th of the month to kind of change up your subscriptions if you want. I think on the 5th is when you get charged. And if you are not a member of the clubs, on the 6th of the month is when you can start signing up. And you have until the 27th to enroll as a club member if you want the current month's club. And it's really easy. You do have to subscribe, but it's really easy to kind of change your subscription. You can just do it all online. You don't have to like email in or have customer support do anything for you. You can kind of turn these on and off when like pretty easily, and you can manage it all online. Now, one of the things that I did not pay very close attention to, but you should always remember if you're doing a pop-up card, that you want to make sure that when your card is closed, that all of the elements that you're attaching are going to be hidden inside the card. And it's sometimes really deceptive because in the 3D form, things don't always look as tall, because once you open it up, it doesn't seem like it would be as tall, but you have to remember it all has to kind of collapse down and fold down flat again. And so this is another reason to be constantly kind of testing your mechanism, opening and closing things to really make sure that everything folds down nice and flat, that everything is hidden when it's closed. And it's at this point that I realized, oh, from the crew, what does that mean? I thought I stamped out just saying hello. But there's another really fun sentiment, and I think it worked really nicely with my scene. So it actually all worked out really well. So I stamped out "Thanks for lighting the way," which I think is pretty cool because I've got the lighthouse in there, and it is sort of like a prominent piece of the scene, especially because I did add the light beams. So in the end, I'm really happy with how that one turned out. Okay, so here is a final look at all 4 cards that I made. That was my flat card featuring the stencil of the month, clear stamp of the month, and the freebie that you get if you are a Deluxe Caboodle member. This is my layered card, which features the 3D embossing folder, the small die of the month, and the clear stamp and die of the month. My interactive card features the large die of the month, and the seagull is part of the small die of the month. And the sentiment, again, is from the clear stamp and die of the month. And this is just a fun little light up card. And then finally, my pop-up card is also featuring the stencil of the month, small die of the month, and the large die of the month. And it's just a really basic pop-up card, but because it's got all the different layers, there's so many opportunities to create so many little scenes, and really like how that one turned out. So let me know if you have a favorite card among these 4. I'm gonna leave links to everything in the description box below if you want to check out any of these club kits for yourself. Thanks so much for checking out my video today, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day. Bye.